February is National Black History or African American History Month. It celebrates the contributions that African Americans have made to American history and their struggles for freedom and equality, along with deepening our understanding of our nation's history. It originated in 1915 when Dr. Carter G. Woodson, an author and historian, founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, now known as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or ASALH. Dr. Woodson initiated the first Negro History Week in February of 1926. He selected the week in February that included the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, key figures in the history of African Americans. In 1975, President Gerald Ford issued what was called a Message on the Observance of Black History Week, urging all Americans to recognize the important contribution made to our nation's life and culture by black citizens. In 1976, the commemoration of Black history in the U.S. was expanded by the ASALH to Black History Month. President Ford issued the first message on the observance of Black History Month. Presidents Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan continued to issue those messages while in office. In 1986, Congress passed Public Law 99-244, which designated February 1986 as National Black African American History Month. It stated that February 1, 1986 would mark the beginning of the 60th annual public and private salute to Black history. It called on the President to issue a proclamation calling on the U.S. citizens to observe it as Black History Month with ceremonies and activities. President Reagan issued the Presidential Proclamation 5443, which said that the foremost purpose of Black History Month is to make all Americans aware of this struggle for freedom and equal opportunity. It is a time to celebrate the many achievements of African Americans in every field, from science and the arts to politics and religion. In January 1996, President Clinton issued Presidential Proclamation 6863 for National African American History Month. This emphasized the theme for that year and the achievements of black women from Sojourner Truth to Toni Morrison. In February 1996, the Senate passed Senate Resolution 229 commemorating Black History Month and the contributions of the African American U.S. Senators. Since 1996, presidents have issued annual proclamations, and on February 1, 2011, President Barack Obama issued a proclamation reflecting the theme of African Americans in the Civil War as the country commemorated the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War.
Mary Ellen Pleasant. Sources place her birth between 1814 and 1817 and her death between 1904 and 1907. Historians believe she played a key role in the financing of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in Virginia in 1859. Mary Ellen gave shelter to fugitive enslaved person Archie Lee and worked the Underground Railroad, ushering people from the South into the North. Biographers claim she was born into slavery in Georgia, but she always stated she was born free in Philadelphia, although she was a domestic servant to a white family in Massachusetts when she was younger, where slavery was illegal. Mary Ellen moved to San Francisco in 1852, seeking her fortune during the gold rush. She worked as a cook for a wealthy businessman and overheard conversations of money and finances on a daily basis. She took the information she learned and built a fortune, becoming one of the richest women in the city. Her investment portfolio included real estate, railroads, restaurants, laundry, and boarding houses. It is estimated her portfolio was worth $30 million, the equivalent to $864 million today. She was not immune to racism even as a rich person. In 1866, a streetcar conductor in San Francisco refused to let Mary Ellen board because she was black. She sued the streetcar company, and the case went to the California Supreme Court. The court ruled that segregation on streetcars was illegal in the state. Her finance partner, Thomas Bell, died in 1892, and his wife sued Mary Ellen for control over the multi-million-dollar fortune. Because their shares were so closely connected and rumors of her businesses being used in illegal ways, Mary Ellen could not prove she had the money or the homes. Mary Ellen spent her last years in poverty living with friends before passing away at the age of 90. Mary Ellen Pleasant is considered one of the first black female self-made millionaires in the United States.
Bessie Coleman was born in 1892 and she died in 1926. Bessie was born in Texas and she had 12 brothers and sisters. Her mom was an African American maid, while her dad was a sharecropper of Native American and African American descent. Her dad left for Oklahoma in 1901 to get away from the discrimination, but everyone else in her family had stayed behind in Texas. Bessie then helped her mother by picking cotton and washing laundry for money. By the age of 18, she had enough money saved to go to Langston University. At the time, it was known as the Colored Agriculture and Normal University, but Bessie had to leave after one semester because she ran out of money. She then joined her brothers in Chicago at the age of 23 and attended the Birmingham School of Beauty Culture in 1915. She started a job as a manicurist in a barber shop. Her brothers served in the military during World War I, and when they came home, they had many stories about France. One of her brothers, John, would tease Bessie that French women could fly planes and she couldn't. It made Bessie want to become a pilot. She applied to many flight schools, but no one would take her because she was a woman and she was black. She was then told by Robert Abbott, a newspaper publisher, to move to France so she could learn to fly. So, Bessie started taking French classes at night so she could apply to flight school. Bessie started at the Caudron Brothers School of Aviation at Le Croix, France, and earned her pilot's license in 1921 for the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. Her dream was to own a plane and open a flight school. She would give speeches and show her air tricks on film to different churches, schools, and theaters to earn some money. She would not speak anywhere that was segregated, though. In 1922, she performed the first flight by a black woman. She was known for doing loop-de-loops and making eights in the sky. It fascinated people, and she became popular in both the U.S. and Europe. She gave different flight lessons and did flight shows and encouraged African Americans, especially the women, to learn to fly. In 1923, though, she had her first airplane accident. The engine had stopped working and she crashed. She suffered a broken leg, some cracked ribs, and various cuts, but she was back to doing her tricks in 1925. Bessie then saved up enough money to own a plane, a Jenny JN-4 with an OX-5 engine. Back in Texas, she then performed for large crowds. Because Texas was segregated at that time, though, there were two separate entrances. Bessie refused to perform unless there was one gate for everyone to enter. The show managers agreed, but said the stadium would still be segregated. She agreed. Bessie was known for standing up for her beliefs whenever she flew. On April 30th of 1926, Bessie took a test flight with a mechanic named William Wills. He was piloting and she was in the passenger seat. At 3,000 feet in the air, a loose wrench got stuck in the engine, and William could no longer control the steering wheel. The plane had flipped. Bessie was not wearing a seatbelt at the time, and airplanes did not have any roofs for protection yet. Bessie fell out of the open plane and died on impact. William Will had crashed the airplane a few feet where Bessie had landed, and he had also died. In 1931, the Challengers Pilots Association of Chicago started a tradition of flying over her grave each year. By 1977, African American women pilots formed the Bessie Coleman Aviators Club, and in 1995, the Bessie Coleman stamp was created. She was the first ever African American and the first Native American woman pilot ever. Her nicknames were Brave Bessie, Queen Bess, and the only race aviatrix in the world. Her life continues to inspire people all around the world.
William H. Hasty, November 1904, April 1976. Born in Knoxville, Tennessee, his heritage is African American, Native American, and some European American. He graduated from Dunbar High School and attended Amherst College in Massachusetts, graduating first in his class, magna cum laude, and Phi Beta Kappa. He earned an Artium Baccalaureus degree. William graduated in 1930 from Harvard Law with a Bachelor of Laws degree and his Doctor of Juridical Science in 1933. William worked in private practice law in Washington, D.C. from 1930 to 1933 and served as the Assistant Solicitor for the U.S. Department of the Interior from 1933 to 1937. He worked in the capacity of advising the agency on racial issues. During this time, he also worked with Charles Hamilton Houston in setting up a joint law practice. In 1937, President Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed William to the District Court of the Virgin Islands. He became the first African American federal judge. This was very controversial, causing U.S. Senator William King, Democrat from Utah, to call the appointment a blunder. In 1939, William resigned from the court and became the dean of Howard University School of Law. When he was a legal professor at Howard, he was a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. One of his students was Thurgood Marshall. William served as a co-lead lawyer with Marshall in the case of Smith versus Allwright, 1944. During World War II, William worked as a civilian aide to the U.S. Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, from 1940 to 1942. He resigned in 1943 under protest against racially segregated training facilities in the U.S. Army Air Forces, inadequate training of black pilots, and unequal distribution of assignments. He received the Spingarn Medal from the NAACP for his lifetime achievements in 1943. President Harry S. Truman appointed William as Territorial Governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands in 1946. He was the first African American to hold that position and governed until 1949. In 1949, Truman moved William to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, making him the first African American federal appellate judge. He was nominated by Truman for the same position a year later. William also served as chief officer as a member of the Judicial Conference of the U.S. from 1968 to 1971, receiving senior status in 1971. He was also a judge of the Temporary Court of Appeals from 1972 to 1976. He was considered as a possible candidate for the Supreme Court by President John F. Kennedy in 1962 to replace retiree Justice Charles Whitaker, but because of politics, he was not nominated, fearing large opposition from the U.S. Senate. Kennedy had planned to nominate William to the court at a later date. William Hasty died from a stroke while playing golf on April 14, 1976, in Philadelphia. The Third Circuit Library in Philadelphia, as well as an urban natural area in Knoxville, is named in his honor.
Matthew Henson, August 1866 to March 1955. He is best known as the co-discoverer of the North Pole with Robert Peary in 1909. Born in Charles County, Maryland, son of two free-born black sharecroppers, his mother passed away when he was very young. At the age of 4, his family moved to Washington, D.C. to search for better work opportunities. His father passed away not long after. Matthew and his siblings were in the care of other family. Matthew left home at age 11 to find his own way. He worked at a restaurant for a short time before walking to Baltimore, Maryland, and began work as a cabin boy on the ship Katie Hines. The ship's skipper, Captain Childs, took Matthew under his wing and made sure he received an education that included learning about workings of a ship. Matthew traveled the world on the ship and was able to see Asia, Africa, and Europe. The captain passed in 1884, and Matthew returned to Washington, D.C., where he worked as a clerk in a hat shop. This is where he met Robert Peary in 1887. Peary was an explorer, an officer in the U.S. Navy Corps of Civil Engineers. Robert liked Matthew's credentials and hired him as a valet on the expedition to Nicaragua. When the expedition was over, Matthew worked in Philadelphia and married his wife, Eva, in 1891. He joined Peary again on an expedition to Greenland. Matthew embraced the local Eskimo culture, learning the language and Arctic survival skills throughout the years. They returned to Greenland a short time later, in 1893, to chart an entire ice cap. The journey was 2 years in length and was almost tragic, as Peary's entire time was close to starvation. They survived by eating all but one of their sled dogs. However, the team returned to Greenland again in 1896 and 1897 to acquire 3 large meteorites that they discovered on previous expeditions. The meteorites were sold to the American Museum of Natural History, which helped funded their journeys. Unfortunately, Matthew's frequent trips away from home caused his marriage to end in divorce in 1897. Over the years, the duo would make many attempts to reach the North Pole. In 1902, 6 Eskimo team members died due to lack of food and supplies. During their 1905 trip, they made progress as they were backed by President Theodore Roosevelt and armed with a state-of-the-art vessel that could cut through ice. The team was able to sail within 175 miles of the North Pole, but melted ice blocked their path and they turned around. During this time, Matthew had a son with an Inuit woman, but he married Lucy Ross back home in 1906. The team tried one last time to reach the North Pole in 1908. Matthew built sleds and trained others how to use them. On April 6, 1909, Peary and Matthew, 4 Eskimos, and 40 dogs finally reached the North Pole, or at least they claimed they did. The expedition started with 24 men, 19 sleds, and 133 dogs. Robert Peary received many accolades upon returning from his accomplishment. Matthew did not, because he was an African American. There was skepticism about their expedition destination, and Peary had to testify before Congress about reaching the North Pole because they did not have verifiable proof. The 1909 expedition is still a mystery. Matthew Henson spent the next 30 years working as a clerk for the New York Federal Customs House. He wrote a book in 1912 about his memories titled A Negro Explorer at the North Pole. In 1937, at the age of 70, Matthew received the acknowledgement he deserved. The Explorers Club in New York accepted him as an honorary member. In 1944, the team was awarded a Congressional Medal. Matthew worked with Bradley Robinson in 1947 to write his biography, titled Dark Companion. Matthew died in New York City in March 1955 and buried in Woodland Cemetery. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan approved the transportation of Matthew and his wife Lucy's remains to be reinterred in the Arlington National Cemetery, per the request of Dr. S. Allen Counter of Harvard. His cemetery is also the burial site of Robert Peary and his wife Josephine.
Jesse Leroy Brown, October 1926 to December 1950. Jesse was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, into a family of sharecroppers. He was an athlete in school and excellent in math. His dream was to become a pilot. He attended Ohio State University in 1944. He worked midnight shift loading boxcars with the Pennsylvania Railroad to earn money for his schooling. He maintained a high GPA. His high school principal said, "As the first of our graduates to enter a predominantly white university, you are our hero." Jesse joined the Naval Reserve in 1946 and became a midshipman in 1947. This helped to also pay for college. He saw a recruiting poster for a new naval aviation program. However, he was told not to apply because he'd never see the cockpit of a Navy aircraft. He kept trying and was finally allowed to take the qualification exam. He told a childhood friend that he went through 5 hours of written tests, oral tests, and a physical exam. Each one he passed with flying colors. He told his friend, "I'm not sure the Navy really wants me." He received his orders to the selective flight training in Illinois in 1947, and more training at the naval air stations in Ottumwa and Pensacola in October of 1948. At 22 years of age, Jesse became the first African-American man to complete flight training. A naval public information officer released a photograph and story using the headline, "First Negro Naval Aviator." The story was picked up by the AP, and Jesse's picture was in Life magazine. Jesse was a section leader and flew a Vought F4U4 Corsair and was assigned to Fighter Squadron VF-32 aboard the USS Wright. His squadron was transferred to the USS Leyte in October 1950 as part of the 1st Carrier Task Force 77 on its way to Korea to assist UN forces. On December 4, 1950, on the way to the chosen reservoir with his squadron, Jesse announced on the radio, "I think I may have been hit. I've lost my oil pressure." He crash-landed his Corsair on the side of a mountain in show. Circling over the crash site, Squadron Commander Lieutenant Thomas J. Hudner, Jr. realized that Jesse did not emerge from the cockpit. Hudner chose to crash land next to Jesse's plane. He risked being court-martialed, captured by the Chinese, or even losing his own life by ignoring his commanding officer's directive. "If a plane goes down, that's one down. We don't need Hollywood stuff." Hudner found Jesse in pain, bleeding and trapped by the instrument panel. There was no way to rescue him. A helicopter with Marine First Lieutenant Charlie Ward came in response, but there was nothing to be done to save Jesse. He was awake and asked Hudner to tell his wife Daisy that he loved her before he passed in the cockpit. Daylight came, and to save their own lives from capture, Hudner and Ward were forced to leave Jesse's body behind. It was never recovered. His shipmates chose to honor him with a warrior funeral on December 7, 1950. 7 aircraft loaded with napalm and piloted by Jesse's friends made several low passes over his downed plane. The top of his head was visible with snow in his hair as they dropped the napalm on the wreckage while reciting the Lord's Prayer. In sign, Jesse Brown received the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal, and the Purple Heart. Hudner received the Medal of Honor instead of being court-martialed. In 1973, the USS Jesse L. Brown was launched, and in 2017, the USS Thomas Hudner, was christened.